حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله اللهم رب هذه الدعوة
بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي واجعل لي وزيرا من أهلي آمين يا رب العالمين. Before I can start today's khutbah, please make a special dua for our brothers and sisters in Gaza, in Palestine, in Sudan. We are not paying attention, subhanallah. There are more than 9,000 to 10,000 people, if not more, have passed away in the tragedies in Sudan. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give them the status of shuhada and gather us all in Jannat al-Firdaus, inshallah ta'ala, and end the occupation. Ameen ya Rabb. The purpose of today's khutbah is just two primary reasons I want to bring this topic in such a style. The Western moral values is not being murdered, rather it's committed suicide. The Western moral values, human life, human rights, justice, social justice, freedom, autonomy, choice, no one is murdering these values, it's committing suicide. And that's the topic for today's khutbah. Why I'm addressing this? For two reasons. I know most of you are coming here from work and then you have to go back to work. Or you are coming here from school and you have to go back to school. First reason is to tell you how attractive yet weak and self-destructive these Western moral values are. Sometimes we don't know. And second reason to bring this up is that this is the best time for Muslims in the West, especially Muslims in America, to go and talk to your colleagues, co-workers, classmates. An intellectual conversation should start, and you should take talking points from this khutbah that when the Western moral values are not even collapsing, rather it is committing suicide, what is the divine moral alternative they should have? And this khutbah inshallah should give you some of the talking points once you go back at your work, at your school, wherever you are, whether talking to Muslim or non-Muslim, at least you should have some talking points to start the intellectual conversation, inshallah ta'ala. For the last 2 decades, post 9/11, I don't know how many of you were here, but for almost last 20 to 23 years, Muslims in America, by the way, who are paying the same amount of taxes like other citizens, who are working and serving in different positions just like other citizens in America, practicing Muslim in America, they constantly felt a need that we need to constantly compensate for last 2 decades to compensate a presumed deficiency in Islam. To make Islam more compatible with the presumably higher Western moral values, even if that comes at the expense of changing the foundation of Islam. And we changed so much about Islamic foundation in last 2 decades just to sound cool Muslim, just to give a message that we are cool Muslim, we are not crazy Muslim as you are trying to show us in the Western media narrative. And now that narrative is committing suicide. Now it's not even a hypocrisy. Hypocrisy have some deception. Now it's open. It's completely undressed. what that narrative was all about. Last month, or I would say precisely 32 days, ever since this Palestine genocide started, it has exposed the entire Western liberal, secular, moral values, and I can safely say that it's not a murder, it's a suicide. How? The West, the America, whether we as a Muslim or non-Muslim American culture takes so much pride on freedom, yes or no? We take so much pride on choice, yes or no? Autonomy, social justice, equality, human rights, women's rights, children's rights, standing with the oppressor. These are presumably, or was presumably, Western moral values. And I will tell you just in this brief khutbah, how these values have committed suicide. Did you see in the last 32 days, if you are following whether Twitter, if you want a fake version of news, then go back to CNN and Fox and try to find out what's going on, you will see all of a sudden different world altogether. Did you notice that? Who are going to decide who are the good guys and bad guys? Tell me. Who are going to decide what is a good and bad and evil? Who are going to decide? Who are going to decide what is truth and falsehood? Who are going to decide who is oppressor and oppressed? Who is going to decide what is morality? This is a very important question. Every time I need to buy the Western media garbage about who is a good guy and bad guy, or there is something called critical thinking, I need to think critically, that there is an obvious truth in this. You should know this, that in the West we take so much pride in democracy. Our system, in political system, is democratic. So much pride, so much pride. But before we can see even how Western democracy have exposed itself at this point, you know, it's very important for all of us living here in the West, we should know, before Europe and America reached to this democracy, Europe and America had theocracy. You need to know this. How did we reach to this presumably democracy? And before we can see how it exposed, there was a theocracy. A totalitarian Christianity was there in Europe. And not only at the church level, rather at the state level, they used to practice totalitarian Christianity. And obviously, the Christianity didn't have anything to offer at the public morality. So who filled that void? Pope. Who filled that void? The people who are running the churches. Because it's not Islam that Islam have Khulafa and Rasulullah's Medina legacy where we get the political guideline. Jesus never established that. So who filled that void in public morality in theocracy? Pope. And in theocracy in Europe for centuries, they did few things that Europe and America did not have a good taste of totalitarian Christianity. Why? It's a different topic. But few reasons are, churches were financially and sexually abusing people in Europe. It's a known fact, just Google it. Second, there were inability to reconcile between the Bible and the science and reason and logic and philosophy. That's why there is no growth was coming in that time in Europe. Third, different denominations of Christianity, Catholics, Protestant, Orthodox, were fighting and killing each other. Just Google it. Just Google it. One denomination was killing other denomination, وَهُمْ يَتْلُونَ الْكِتَابِ, and they would justify the killing of each other by using the same biblical verses. When this happened, when people in the Europe, and for stretching it's people in America, they got the bad taste of theocracy and totalitarian Christianity, what they did, they privatized Jesus. They individualized religion. They said, Jesus, just keep it in the four walls of church. Don't bring Jesus outside of the church because you will get violence again. Are you following, brothers and sisters? I'm just telling you how did we get here. They said, let's reduce the role of Jesus and religion and revelation to the four walls of church because otherwise you'll have violence and nightmares and bloodshed again. We have to witness the bloodbath again. So after the individualization or privatization, or in philosophy, secularization of the religion, the question came, how do we define the public morality? Do you know how then they define public morality after they reduced the role of religion? Then all the isms came. Liberalism, conservatism, socially feminism, so on, so forth. ologies came, ideologies. And they said that there are few golden mean of morality. We have to establish our morality on that. And I just want to tell you what are the golden means of Western morality. Is that clear? And they have committed suicide in last month. First, golden mean of Western morality, the foundation, the pillar, is freedom. They take a lot of pride. Freedom of speech is a big thing in the West. You know why it's a big thing? You have to know this. Freedom of speech is a big thing in the West. Ask anyone who have studied some basic philosophy. They will tell you it's a big thing in West because back in the day they couldn't express themselves because they had a fear that they will be executed, excommunicated by the church. Now they can freely express themselves. That's why freedom of speech is big in the West. I'll tell you how it committed suicide in 2 minutes. Second, choice and autonomy. It's a huge concept in the West, very big thing in the West. It's a golden mean to gauge the right and wrong, choice and autonomy. You can do whatever you want to minimize the harm and pain and maximize the pleasure without any interference from outside. Even outside religion, God have no interference. You can do because you were abused by the religion. That's why choice and autonomy is very big in the Western countries. Are you following? Then you see women rights. Then you see human rights. Then you just go on, democracy. Everything is taken out from this culture. Women rights, why? Because European men oppressed women so much, and you see the 17th, 18th century of Europe, that their movement of feminism and women rights came, and they said women have complete freedom. So women rights is a huge thing in the West. Human rights is a huge thing in the West. Equality as defined by the West, and we will see how it is, how it has so many loopholes, is a huge thing in the West. Similarly, democracy. Democracy is a huge thing in the West because they just came out of theocracy. They just came out of totalitarian Christianity. Says that we don't want God to dictate us, we will dictate ourselves. Democracy. It should be run, public legislation, public morality should be run by the people, for the people. That's the idea of democracy, right? And we take so much pride. But before we can see how these values committed suicide, especially in last few months, a ayah came into my mind. In Surah Nur, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَن لَمْ يَجْعَلِ اللَّهُ لَهُ نُورًا فَمَا لَهُ مِن نُور. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have not given you divine light, nur, then you will be lost in darkness. There is no light for you. If you leave Allah, how can you find morality? That's what happens, subhanallah. Now let's come how these values committed suicide. Subhanallah, we ran away from religion because we want to avoid bloodshed and violence, right? Look at last 100 years. Did we get more bloodshed or violence? Absolutely yes. Although we are going away from religion, we privatize the religion, we thought we are fed up from violence, but we became more violent as a human being. Yes or no? Let's go back to Japan for a minute. What happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki? Just Google it. 350,000. 350,000, 0.35 million people died. Humans died when someone pressed 2 buttons. That's it. It's not a small number. 0.35 million. 350,000 humans. Go to Afghanistan and Iraq in last 20 years. You know how many humans die? The reason why I'm using humans, because if I will use Muslim, some people dehumanize Muslims, right? So let's use human. Unfortunately. Malakum kayfa tahkumun. Last 20 years, Google it. You don't even have to buy a book on Amazon. Google it. 20 years. It's mind-boggling the numbers. How many humans died? 4.7 million in last 20 years. But obviously we don't have Twitter back in the days, right? So we could only buy the narrative what we were presented with. And now what you see in Gaza and other places, subhanallah. So we clearly became more violent after privatizing the religion, right? And even that religion had issues. What about the freedom of speech where we take so much pride? It committed suicide. How? Let's take the example. France. Consider this a freedom of speech if you want to make fun of Prophet. Yes or no? If you want to burn the Quran, they would defend that this is freedom of speech. But wait a minute. 2 weeks ago, we heard that you cannot make fun of certain nation states. That's illegal in France. You cannot make fun or say something about certain sexuality ideas in same France. Who is going to decide what is freedom of speech and what is hate and what is hurt? Did you see the dichotomy here? For France, if you make fun of God, that's okay. They came from the entire theocracy. They want to make fun of God. But if you will make fun of nation state, it's few of them, or few sexuality ideas which they consider as universal, then you are hurting our feelings. This is the problem with the narrative. That's why I'm saying these freedom of speech idea have so many loopholes, so many loopholes. And in recent times, it's just committing suicide. Similarly, the idea of choice and autonomy. In Islam, we say if a woman abort 7-month fetus without any reason, this is violence. We say this, right? This is violence. There is a soul of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in it, right? And if a man or a woman or family, they both decide or a woman decide to abort the fetus without any reason, 6, 7, 8 months, then we consider this an act of violence. You have taken a life of human being. But in the Western countries, if you do this, it's a good violence because a woman is exercising her choice on her body. You can do whatever you want with your body because it's your body, it's your choice. Did you see how the dichotomy of good violence versus bad violence will come? Or how necessary violence will come? Who is going to decide this? You have removed the God who is deciding all these things. Then you move on to the women's rights. Then you move on to the human rights. Who is going to decide? Forget about the women's rights. Let's focus on, did we decide the definition of woman? 100 years ago, we did not give women right to vote. And now we don't even know what is a woman. And we were going to morally lecture people about the women's rights? Same thing for human rights. Forget about the human rights. Take a pause. Who is human? Ask yourself, who is human? You know, some Muslims, subhanAllah, I know their intention is so nice, mashallah, I'm not doubting their intention, but they would say, Imam Asif, I'm human first, Muslim second. Have you heard this argument? I am human first, I'm insan first, Muslim second. Habibi, there's a problem with this argument. There is no one definition and agreement of what is human. Maybe it looks like Afghanistani human or Palestinian human is lesser of a human than white human or an American human. It feels like that way. Or a hijabi sister in Palestine or in these countries looks like a less of a human than a white blonde woman in the Florida beaches. Looks like. Who is going to define what is human? When we say we are Muslims, we are following the definition of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who is human. We are following what are the rights of human, whether Muslim or non-Muslim. وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. We have honored son of Adam, whether Muslim or non-Muslim, whether black or white. That's Islamic perspective. But if you would say, no, I'm human first, then let's define what is human. Because we have tendency to dehumanize people. Look at some media outlets, what they are doing. So these attractive terms are very self-deceptive. Very self-deceptive. If I would have given this khutbah 10 years ago, I'm pretty sure some of you would have said, Imam Asif, you are going too hard. But now I think most of you, even with the half of the intellect in the audience, you will recognize what I'm talking about. It's self-deceptive. Suicide of the values of equality and standing with the oppressors. The West said that Ukraine have a right to resist. Okay, what about Palestine, Habibi? Palestine don't have a right to resist? Maybe they are less of a human than Ukrainians? Some other country have a right to defend themselves. Okay, Habibi. Palestine, they have a right to defend themselves also. So what's the problem with it? But clearly they are not human according to your definition, so they don't have the rights which basic human rights tell you according to your logic. Did you see the dichotomy? And this is a problem. And this is the major problem. Once you remove God from your discourse, then these terms just become meaningless. You can drive whatever you want to. And the final thing is the suicide of even democracy. Suicide of democracy. Democracy is where representatives of government make laws which will reflect the will of the people like me and you. Yes or no? Okay. But now what we see is that even though it sounds like actually the representatives should represent or manifest or exhibit the wills of the citizen, the will of the citizens, but it looks like that even that is impacted with this entire moral dichotomy. How? It's not necessarily that I as a citizen will going to have a say, because it looks like 65% of American population went with ceasefire in the recent poll, that we should cease fire. 65%. With all this media narrative, billions of dollar marketing, even 65% of Americans think we should cease fire. So why it's not happening? A truly democratic country should go with the will of the people, right? I'm not saying about which is Islamic, un-Islamic, haram or halal. I'm just saying this is your rules, Habibi. Just go with it. But it looks like that instead of, we say that we are democratic, but there's someone else, like lobbying groups are running the representative. Business owner, company corporations are running the representatives. And they cannot ruffle the feathers because they have to come into the next election. So they have to do sajda to these big lobby groups, and they have to take their permission before they can say anything, because the people's entire idea of ceasefire should be acted upon otherwise. Similarly, media. Back in the days we thought media is a free media. Alhamdulillah, now most of the Muslims are exposed that this is not true. This media is actually there to support the idea of powerful lobby groups, influence people, making mind of the people in certain way instead of reporting the truth. Because again, they don't follow morality from Allah and Messenger. Why should we have any surprises? There are 3 to 4 books which I have used to prepare today's khutbah. If you are interested, inshallah, you can come and talk to me. But I'll tell you one thing, that you might think in a democracy that we have a say as a normal citizen, but it looks like, as Talal Asad said in his book Formations of Secular, it looks like that in real world the business leaders, the party bosses, the bureaucratic administrators and parliamentary legislations and legislators, they are the making decision, and we are just basically working in the circus. That's what it feels like, according to Talal Asad. Who controls the morality then? This is an important point. Back in the days, it was totalitarian Christianity, and now we think it's us, but it's not us. It's someone else. You are still surrendering. You are still submitting. Now you decide which submission is better. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us all tawfiq, inshallah ta'ala. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulullah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa ala amma ba'd. My brothers and sisters, when you are going back to your work, when you are going back to your school, you should be confident yet wise when communicating with your colleagues, your co-workers, your classmates. You should not feel coming from a defeatist mentality. You should be proud and confident about the religion and present religion, that Islam is not a problem, rather it's the only solution to your Western declining civilization. Right now you need Islam more than anyone else, because otherwise, technology-wise you are great, but morally-wise you are getting bankrupt. So present Islam as a solution. Try to pinpoint these things which I just mentioned. Try to see this khutbah. I'm hoping that this khutbah will be there on YouTube and Facebook. And tell them that we are not born free. You were afraid, you had an allergy with religion, you came from theocracy to democracy, and you are feeling that you are free. No one is free. We are following something. Now you decide, following a human being or a group of human beings with the agenda is better, or following Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His final message is important. Try to present this religion in that way. And the entire attractive idea of freedom and choice and autonomy and democracy, all these are meaningless terms because of the last few weeks or month, what it have unfolded. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect our ummah. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect our brothers and sisters in Palestine. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect our brothers and sisters in Sudan. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect our brothers and sisters in Kashmir and wherever they are struggling. Allahumma ansur al-Islam wal-Muslimin. Allahumma اخذل من خذل دين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ولا تجعلنا معهم. اللهم لا تدع لنا ذنبا إلا غفرت ولا هما إلا فرجت ولا دينا إلا قضيت ولا حاجة من حوائج الدنيا ولا آخرة إلا قضيتها يا أرحم الراحمين ولا مريضا إلا شفيت ولا ميتا إلا رحمت ولا ضالا إلا هديت يا أرحم الراحمين. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين والمسلمات فقيم الصلاة.
الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
استووا استقيموا واعتدلوا. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. والتين والزيتون وطور سينين وهذا البلد الأمين لقد خلقنا الإنسان في أحسن تقويم ثم رددناه أسفل سافلين إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات فلهم أجر غير ممنون. فما يكذبك بعد بالدين أليس الله بأحكم الحاكمين. الله سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. الله سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان الله. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. We have a janazah inshallah. Just a few minutes.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. If you have family of a disease, please, if you can move up. There's no family? Oh yeah, okay, inshallah. We are waiting, brother, please come. Please come. So, Salatul Janazah have 4 takbirat. After the first Allahu Akbar, first takbir, first Allahu Akbar, we have to say Surah Fatiha. After the second Allahu Akbar, we would send salawat on Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, like Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, as we do in salah. After the third Allahu Akbar, we're going to make dua for the disease, and after the fourth Allahu Akbar, we're going to say salam. The janazah is of the brother. Allahu Akbar. Alhamdulillah. Allahu Akbar. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى ال محمد كما صليت على ابراهيم وعلى ال ابراهيم انك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى ال ابراهيم انك حميد مجيد. الله اكبر. اللهم اغفر لحينا وميتنا وشاهدنا وغائبنا وصغيرنا وكبيرنا وذكرنا وانثانا. اللهم من احييته منا فاحيه على الاسلام منا فتوفه يرق الثوب الابيض من الدنس وابدله دارا خيرا من داره ورحمه زوجكم. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
His burial will be at Wrestland. Assalamu alaikum. The burial will be at Wrestland Cemetery. If you would like to follow the janaza, just follow the janaza at Wrestland Cemetery, inshallah.
I didn't know how to say it. There are so many. How are you doing? Well, in the office that I came up here and down there. Assalamualaikum. How are you?
When I wish I was in school, so I could go home early. They say like sometimes I come early. One lakh to Khutbah.
नहीं दुआ में याद रखिए इंशाल्लाह.
Inshallah, till December 10th I'll be back.
Inshallah. Yeah, so I will come back from Umrah late November inshallah.
Yeah. Thank you.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah. 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 Very interesting.